What is the limit and how to approach it? In this lesson, we're going to talk about the problem of the limit. You will know very soon. The definition of the limit, we're going to determine exactly what it means in this course, the types of limits, and how to approach the limit. So, what is the problem of the limit? Almost no one really agrees what the limit means. You can say the limit as a very conceptual thing, especially real-life drivers, right? Oh, I reached the limit. When you only reach the limit when you actually slide or you go off and you crash, that was the limit. You know, do you have the balls to go and drive to the limit? Or you can say, oh yeah, I was driving on the limit. You see a lot of people saying I was driving on the limit and they're like 2 seconds off the pace. So were they on the limit? Or what does the limit mean to that person who's 2 seconds off compared to someone who's saying, oh, actually, you know, I was not on the limit and that person is 2 seconds faster. So we are going to solve this problem here by creating a definition of the limit, which is going to be used throughout this whole course. The limit a single tire can achieve is the maximum force it can create to change the direction or speed of the car. So the limit here, we're going to be very scientific about it. It's the limit of a tire. You can be on the limit of the front tires. That's understeer. You can be on the limit of the rear tires, that's oversteer. You can be on the limit of braking, you lock, or you got ABS. You see, I'm going to use limit in a very specific way so that we don't have this kind of confusion. So let's talk about the types of limits. First of all, we have the limit of acceleration. If you're trying to accelerate the car, especially at low speeds, the tire is going to try to move the body forward. And if there's too much power and too much rotation on the tires, it doesn't have enough force to grab to the track and it slips backwards, right? It slips backwards instead of the car going faster, the car starts slowly accelerating while the tire is burning and slipping and spinning against the track. That is wheel spin. That is definitely one form of limit. If the car has traction control, then it's going to automatically cut the torque so that the tire doesn't slip as much, and that's going to save the tire. That's going to save you from getting too much wheel spin and losing the rear of the car and spinning. Then we have the limit of deceleration. As you can see here, we're talking about the longitudinal limits first. It is the opposite of deceleration. The tire is already rolling over the track and the brakes will try to make it stop rolling. So it's doing this and it's trying to make it stop, but if it doesn't have enough grab, it's going to slide over the track and that is going to cause a tire lockup. So the limit of deceleration is the point at which the tire stops being effective at stopping the car, at slowing the car down, and then it gives up very quickly and locks and starts sliding on the track. As soon as the tire locks and starts sliding on the track, the actual forces that it's creating to slow the car down, they actually go down. So the car stops less quickly. The car keeps moving further if you lock up the tire, if you reach the limit of deceleration. If you have ABS, then the system will prevent the tire from completely locking up and dragging against the track, which would create, a lot of wear. It would create a flat spot. It would literally make your tire square and you would hear a lot of vibrations and the tire would be useless. After a long lockup, the tire gets useless, on top of you not even stopping and potentially crashing. So the ABS will limit the amount of braking force, and it will actually, as soon as it feels that the tire is starting to lock, it decreases a little bit the braking force to let the tire still roll a little bit. So it's really limiting and controlling that pressure electronically because you are braking too hard and the system is not letting that much pressure on the tire, just enough so that it doesn't lock up, which will make the car slow down way more than if you just were locking up the tire. Next, we have the limit of cornering, which is when you're trying to turn the car at too much speed and you're asking for an amount of rotation that the tires cannot take. It's pretty much the same thing as the longitudinal limit, but just get the car to be kind of sideways. So if the car is sideways like this, it's sliding against the track. The contact patch of the tire is sliding against the track. So if you're trying to turn, again, inertia wants you to go straight, but you're trying to turn to a direction. As soon as you get that, you're creating forces against the track, against the direction of that mass. The mass wants to go straight, but you're forcing that. The tires are forcing the car to turn. And if you force too much to the point where the tiny contact patch is not capable of creating enough forces, it's not capable of resisting that direction and making the car change direction, as soon as it gives up, it will start sliding forwards instead of going to the direction you want it. So if you're trying to rotate the car a lot and the rear tires are too grippy and the rear tires are resisting that rotation, then the front tires give up first, and instead of creating forces, as soon as they start sliding, they create less forces, and then they start sliding, and the car will go straighter than you expected. In oversteer, it's really the rear tires that are not capable of resisting that rotation. So the front tires will point to a direction, and then the rear tires are trying to resist that, but if they give up, or if you're causing too much force that the rear tires start sliding first, then the rear of the car will go straighter than the fronts. And that is what creates that rotation, because the front tires are pointing to a direction and the rear tires are being thrown forwards because they're not capable of grabbing the track and also going to the direction the front tires are going. And this is how oversteer happens. You have to remember always the rear tires react to whatever the front tires do. The front tires ask for a task, the rear tires will respond to that task. It's very important to know that the understeer or oversteer will not depend only on the car, but also on your driving inputs. What you do with the inputs, with the pedals and the steering, will make the car oversteer or understeer a lot. Probably even more than the setup if the setup is decent. So I don't know if you've ever done that, but you have to stop blaming the car for understeer or oversteer. You have to stop saying that it's too pointy and you can't drive or something like this. Obviously, to a level of detail where you're looking for a tenth or two, that is going to make a lot more sense. But before you do that complaint, remember that a good driver knows how to make an understeer car oversteer and also how to make an oversteer car understeer. Through the driving inputs, you're able to induce more of a behavior, even though the car has already a natural tendency towards one of the behaviors in the first place. And we will talk about that in the active versus passive driving in level 4 mastery in way more detail. Then we obviously have combined limits, which is very, very, very important. The same tires used for acceleration and deceleration will have to be used for rotation. This means that if you abuse the rear tires, for example, by getting a lot of wheel spin, while at the same time asking the car to turn, well, now you're abusing the tires that were busy with the rotation and they will have grip for nothing. And that is why when you get wheel spin, for example, you will just lose the car because you are now overwhelming the tire and it gives up on everything you ask it to do. The same thing for the front tires under braking, for example. If you're braking into a corner and you start turning too much without releasing the brakes, now you're asking the tire to do a lot of work under braking and to do a lot of work on turning. That tire is going to give up. That combination of requests overwhelms 100% of the grip available of the tire, and it will either just understeer or actually lock up fully and the car will go straight and will say, nope, I will not do that because you're asking too much from me. It's also possible to lock the rear tires when you're turning into the corner, which will cause an immediate oversteer. As soon as the tire blocks, the car will not be able to continuously turn to the direction you're going. The rear tires will go straight. If the tires are going straight and the fronts are turning, that's causing this motion, and then the car is just gonna immediately spin. It's very important to know that over the limit means less grip and less forces. You can say, oh, but I have ABS, but I have traction control. Shouldn't I just, be aggressive and let the electronic aids help me? Well, no, because even when you get into actual ABS, when you're trying to rotate the car, you will have less grip. There is an optimal place just under overdriving, which is actually at the very limit where you will get the most forces from the car. And if you abuse that, you can even get away with it, but you're gonna notice that you're carrying a little bit less speed, or you're generating a little bit less rotation, or maybe too much rotation, and then you're scrubbing the tires, and then you don't have exit speed and so on. So overdriving will generally lead to less performance. There's very, very rare exceptions to that. But you also don't want to be under the limit too much. By under the limit here, I am talking about never dealing with understeer or oversteer. Always having the car responding to all your inputs because you're not on the limit of the speed and therefore not on the limit of lateral grip or longitudinal grip, which is not ideal, and I will show you why. In sim racing, overdriving in a controlled way is more productive than underdriving. for learning. And let's talk about that. So let's quantify an imaginable limit here. Let's say we are an underdriver. We are right here. An underdriver has an issue. It's very easy to carry very different speeds. As long as you're under the limit, there's not gonna be oversteer or understeer or any big risk. So you can easily be actually quite inconsistent. And as soon as you go over the limit, you're probably gonna go over the limit by a lot and you're gonna be very punished. So right here, we will have a big problem because if you're never on the limit, when it happens, you're not prepared for it. That is very, very, very important. In contrast, if you're an overdriver, let's say you're someone who's like always, above the line. You're actually controlling a lot more and experiencing a lot more the limit because you're being constantly punished by it. You're constantly dealing with understeer and oversteer and tire lock, and you can see it happening and you're always learning from that experience. So overdriving actually allows you to, on the long term, be way more consistent compared to underdriving, because underdriving allows you, without a lot of punishment, without any penalties, to be very, very inconsistent with your driving, and eventually you actually do a very big mistake, while overdriving forces you to learn every corner. So am I telling you to be an overdriver? Kinda, but listen to me. Listen to me. You want to be a scientist overdriver. You want to induce understeer on purpose, induce oversteer on purpose as a part of a controlled overdriving method. You want to do some controlled overdriving for the sake of experimenting with the tires, for the sake of experiencing how it feels and developing your precision. You don't want to just go all in without really learning anything. You want to try stuff. Oh, let me try actually inducing a little bit of understeer here. Oh, okay, it feels like this. Let me try dancing with the car a little bit. Let me throw the car into the corner here, see what happens. If you're doing that while being super aware and just with the objective of learning, that is controlled overdriving, and I strongly recommend it. Now, your proficiency with the limit will improve over time. As a beginner, you're going to be able to say, oh, I actually did understeer in this corner. You can easily say that you understeered, and then on the next lap, you're going to say, oh, I oversteered this time. Over time, as you gain proficiency, you're going to be able to identify different states in the same corner. So instead of just oversteering this corner, you might say, oh, actually, I had understeer on entry, and then I had oversteer on exit. Ooh, okay. So now you can see that your proficiency is good enough for you to feel two different states in the same corner. We can even call this, your refresh rate is 2 states per corner. That's how much you can perceive with your level of experience. And then over time, you become even more experienced. So you can get a little bit of oversteer on entry, and then you can get understeer on mid-corner, and then you can get oversteer on exit. So now you're able to identify 3 different states in the same corner, which means your reaction times and your proficiency with the inputs and with the response of the car are getting better. You want to break this down to a point where you really, really understand what is happening to the car at every fraction of a second. And the more time you drive, the easier this is going to get. So how do we approach the limit? What's the safest way? What's the best way to learn all those limits in the safest way possible? The first thing you have to know about a race car in real life, in the sim, anywhere, is what is the peak deceleration capability. You need to know how much the car can slow down. Because if you're going flat out on a straight before a hairpin, you can't guess. You don't want to guess where you're going to brake. You want to brake hard. You want to get a feeling for the G's. You're going to see how much the car can slow down and use that as a very important factor when you determine your braking reference in the future. So the very first thing I do in real life, for example, I see a hairpin, I'm super fast, 260 kilometers per hour. I'm not going to choose a braking reference that I found in the sim, or someone tells me, oh, brake at the 3. I'm not going to brake at the 3. I'm going to brake at the 5, and I'm going to feel the deceleration, and I'm going to get that information, that longitudinal information. And then on the next lap, I can brake at the 4, feel it, and then on the next lap, I can brake at the 3. So I'm really always trying to feel the peak deceleration before anything else, because it's the most important thing for safety and for consistency. You don't want to guess how late you're going to brake anywhere ever. Then we will find minimum speed understeer. This is great because it's going to help you understand how much speed you will eventually gonna be able to carry on that specific corner. So we induce a little bit of understeer, which is very predictable, very safe, and you're only using the front tire, so you're not really going as fast as possible, but you're getting some information of how close you are to the speed that you will eventually carry when you're not understeering too much, but actually, you know, carrying good rotation and really trying to trail brake into the corner and so on. So minimum speed understeer is another very, very safe way to find the limit. At first you do that on very low speed corners, and then you do that on medium speed corners, and then you can try to do that on high speed corners, which sometimes depends more on the setup than the low speed stuff, but that is the process. And then only then we start dealing with oversteer. When we have now a good braking reference, we know how much the car can stop, we know how much speed we will eventually carry in each corner because we got some understeer to feel the limit of the fronts, and then we can start, you know, using both the fronts and the rears and get the car to rotate and dent a little bit more in the corner so that we can reach the actual top minimum speed we could carry in that corner. I'm going to be teaching you how to induce understeer and oversteer still in this course, just a few lessons in the future. And I'm also going to talk about weight transfer at the level 2 course, balance and speed. It's a very advanced lesson that is going to help you understand completely how weight transfer works and how you can use it to find lap times. On the next 3 lessons, I'm going to teach you about consistency. See ya.